Book 1, Chapter 47 of Resurrection. Nekhludoff had to wait in the hall for a long time. When he had arrived at the prison and rung at the entrance door, he handed the permission of the procureur to the jailer on duty, who met him. "No, no," the jailer on duty said hurriedly. "The inspector is engaged." "In the office?" asked Nekhludoff. "No, here in the interviewing room." "Why, is it a visiting day today?" "No, it's special business." "I should like to see him. What am I to do?" said Nekhludoff. "When the inspector comes out, we'll tell him." "Wait a bit," said the jailer. At this moment a sergeant major, with a smooth, shiny face and moustaches impregnated with tobacco smoke, came out of a side door, with the gold cords of his uniform glistening, and addressed the jailer in a severe tone. "What do you mean by letting anyone in here? The office?" "I was told the inspector was here," said Nekhludoff, surprised at the agitation he noticed in the sergeant major's manner. At this moment the inner door opened and Petrov came out, heated and perspiring. "He'll remember it," he muttered, turning to the sergeant major. The latter pointed at Nekhludoff by a look, and Petrov knitted his brows and went out through a door at the back. "Who will remember it? Why do they all seem so confused? Why did the sergeant major make a sign to him?" Nekhludoff thought. The sergeant major, again addressing Nekhludoff, said, "You cannot meet here. Please step across to the office." And Nekhludoff was about to comply when the inspector came out of the door at the back, looking even more confused than his subordinates and sighing continually. When he saw Nekhludoff, he turned to the jailer. "Fedotov, have Maslova, cell 5, women's ward, taken to the office." "Will you come this way, please?" he said, turning to Nekhludoff. They ascended a steep staircase and entered a little room with one window, a writing table and a few chairs in it. The inspector sat down. "Mine are heavy, heavy duties," he remarked, again addressing Nekhludoff, and took out a cigarette. "You are tired, evidently," said Nekhludoff. "Tired of the whole of the service. The duties are very trying. One tries to lighten their lot and only makes it worse. My only thought is how to get away. Heavy, heavy duties." Nekhludoff did not know what the inspector's particular difficulties were, but he saw that today he was in a peculiarly dejected and hopeless condition, calling for pity. "Yes, I should think the duties were heavy for a kind-hearted man," he said. "Why do you serve in this capacity?" "I have a family." "But if it is so hard?" "Well, still, you know, it is possible to be of use in some measure. I soften down all I can. Another in my place would conduct the affairs quite differently. Why, we have more than 2,000 persons here. And what persons! One must know how to manage them. It is easier said than done, you know. After all, they are also men. One cannot help pitying them." The inspector began telling Nekhludoff of a fight that had lately taken place among the convicts, which had ended by one man being killed. The story was interrupted by the entrance of Maslova, who was accompanied by a jailer. Nekhludoff saw her through the doorway before she had noticed the inspector. She was following the warder briskly, smiling and tossing her head. When she saw the inspector she suddenly changed, and gazed at him with a frightened look, but quickly recovering, she addressed Nekhludoff boldly and gaily. "How d'ye do?" she said, drawling out her words, and smilingly took his hand and shook it vigorously, not like the first time. "Here, I've brought you a petition to sign," said Nekhludoff, rather surprised by the boldness with which she greeted him today. "The advocate has written out a petition, which you will have to sign, and then we shall send it to Petersburg." "All right, that can be done. Anything you like," she said, with a wink and a smile. And Nekhludoff drew a folded paper from his pocket and went up to the table. "May she sign it here?" asked Nekhludoff, turning to the inspector. It's all right, sit down. Here's a pen, you can write," said the inspector. "I could at one time," she said, and after arranging her skirt and the sleeves of her jacket, She sat down at the table, smiled awkwardly, took the pen with her small, energetic hand, and glanced at Nekhludoff with a laugh. Nekhludoff told her what to write, and pointed out the place where to sign. Sighing deeply as she dipped her pen into the ink, and carefully shaking some drops off the pen, she wrote her name. "Is that all?" she asked, looking from Nekhludoff to the inspector, and putting the pen now on the inkstand, now on the papers. "I have a few words to tell you," Nekhludoff said, taking the pen from her. "All right, tell me," she said, and suddenly, as if remembering something or feeling sleepy, she grew serious. The inspector rose and left the room, and Nekhludoff remained with her. End of Book 1, Chapter 47.
Book 1, Chapter 48, of Resurrection. The jailer who had brought Maslova in sat on a window-sill at some distance from them. The decisive moment had come for Nekhludoff. He had been incessantly blaming himself for not having told her the principal thing at the first interview, and was now determined to tell her that he would marry her. She was sitting at the further side of the table. Nekhludoff sat down opposite her. It was light in the room, and Nekhludoff, for the first time, saw her face quite near. He distinctly saw the crow's feet round her eyes, the wrinkles round her mouth, and the swollen eyelids. He felt more sorry than before. Leaning over the table so as not to be heard by the jailer, a man of Jewish type with grizzly whiskers who sat by the window, Nekhludoff said, "Should this petition come to nothing, we shall appeal to the Emperor. All that is possible shall be done." "There now, if we had had a proper advocate from the first," she interrupted. "My defender was quite a silly. He did nothing but pay me compliments," she said, and laughed. "If it had been known that I was acquainted with you, it would have been another matter. They think everyone's a thief." "How strange she is to-day," Nekhludoff thought, and was just going to say what he had on his mind when she began again. "There's something I want to say. We have here an old woman, such a fine one, do you know? She just surprises everyone. She is imprisoned for nothing, and her son too, and everybody knows they are innocent, though they are accused of having set fire to a house. Do you know, hearing I was acquainted with you, she says, 'Tell him to ask to see my son. He'll tell him all about it.'" Thus spoke Maslova, turning her head from side to side and glancing at Nekhludoff. "Their name's Menshoff. Well, will you do it? Such a fine old thing, you know. You can see at once she's innocent. You'll do it. There's a dear." And she smiled, glanced up at him, and then cast down her eyes. "All right. I'll find out about them," Nekhludoff said, more and more astonished by her free and easy manner. "But I was going to speak to you about myself. Do you remember what I told you last time?" "You said a lot last time. What was it you told me?" she said, continuing to smile and turn her head from side to side. "I said I had come to ask you to forgive me," he began. "What's the use of that? Forgive, forgive. What's the good of to atone for my sin? Not by mere words, but in deed. I have made up my mind to marry you." An expression of fear suddenly came over her face. Her squinting eyes remained fixed on him, and yet seemed not to be looking at him. "What's that for?" she said, with an angry frown. "I feel it is my duty before God to do it." "What God have you found now? You are not saying what you ought to. God, indeed! What God? You ought to have remembered God then," she said, and stopped with her mouth open. It was only now that Nekhludoff noticed that her breath smelled of spirits, and that he understood the cause of her excitement. "Try and be calm," he said. "Why should I be calm?" she began quickly, flushing scarlet. "I am a convict, and you are a gentleman and a prince. There's no need for you to soil yourself by touching me. You go to your princesses. My price is a 10-rouble note. However cruelly you may speak, you cannot express what I myself am feeling," he said, trembling all over. "You cannot imagine to what extent I feel myself guilty towards you." "Feel yourself guilty?" she said, angrily mimicking him. "You did not feel so then, but threw me 100 roubles. That's your price." I know. But what is to be done now?" said Nekhludoff. "I have decided not to leave you, and what I have said I shall do." "And I say you shan't," she said, and laughed aloud. "Katusha," he said, touching her hand, "you go away. I am a convict, and you are a prince, and you've no business here," she cried, pulling away her hand, her whole appearance transformed by her wrath. "You've got pleasure out of me in this life, and want to save yourself through me in the life to come. You are disgusting to me. Your spectacles, and the whole of your dirty fat mug. Go, go!" she screamed, starting to her feet. The jailer came up to them. "What are you kicking up this row for? That won't—" "Let her alone, please," said Nekhludoff. "She must not forget herself," said the jailer. "Please, wait a little," said Nekhludoff, and the jailer returned to the window. Maslova sat down again, dropping her eyes and firmly clasping her small hands. Nekhludoff stooped over her, not knowing what to do. "You do not believe me?" he said. "That you mean to marry me? It will never be. I'll rather hang myself. So there. Well, still, I shall go on serving you. That's your affair, only I don't want anything from you. I am telling you the plain truth," she said. "Oh, why did I not die then?" she added, and began to cry piteously. Nekhludoff could not speak. Her tears infected him. She lifted her eyes, looked at him in surprise, and began to wipe her tears with her kerchief. The jailer came up again and reminded them that it was time to part. Maslova rose. "You are excited. If it is possible, I shall come again tomorrow. You think it over," said Nekhludoff. She gave him no answer, and, without looking up, followed the jailer out of the room. "Well, lass, you'll have rare times now," Korableva said when Maslova returned to the cell. "Seems he's mighty sweet on you. Make the most of it while he's after you. He'll help you out. Rich people can do anything." "Yes, that's so," remarked the watchman's wife, with her musical voice. "When a poor man thinks of getting married, there's many a slip twixt the cup and the lip, but a rich man need only make up his mind, and it's done. We knew a toff like that ducky. What do you think he did?" "Well, have you spoken about my affairs?" the old woman asked. But Maslova gave her fellow prisoners no answer. She lay down on the shelf bedstead, her squinting eyes fixed on a corner of the room, and lay there until evening. A painful struggle went on in her soul. What Nekhludoff had told her called up the memory of that world in which she had suffered, and which she had left without having understood, hating it. She now feared to wake from the trance in which she was living. Not having arrived at any conclusion when evening came, she again bought some vodka, and drank with her companions. End of Book 1, Chapter 48.